He threw the money I lovingly tucked into his wallet right back in my face. In a split second, the husband I knew turned into a complete stranger. What is this hidden resentment eating him up from the inside? Something I missed entirely in these last 7 months. Why did a wife's success become an insult to her husband rather than a source of pride? How did our perfect home suddenly turn into a cold space shared by two strangers? And where does this battle of ego and silence end? In a tragedy or in a divorce? Hello everyone, this is Sneha. Join me as we uncover the heartbreaking reality hidden behind this story of love. Take a deep breath. Let go of the day. Let go of the noise, the traffic, the endless scrolling on your phone. Close your eyes. I want you to come with me to a city of glass and steel where the winter wind sings a low, hollow song against the windows. We are in Toronto. It's late. The kind of late where the city lights below look like blurred stars reflected in a dark ocean. I'm standing by the window of our apartment looking out, but I'm not really seeing the city. I'm listening to the silence inside the room behind me. This story, my story, isn't a fairy tale. It's real. It's about the quiet spaces between two people who love each other and the invisible walls that slowly, brick by brick, rise up to separate them. Let's go back a little, not too far, just 7 months. 7 months isn't a long time, is it? In the grand scheme of a life, 7 months is just a blink. We had only been married for that short amount of time. We were supposed to be in that golden phase, the honeymoon phase. That time when everything is new, everything is exciting, and the world feels like it was built just for the two of us. My husband, let's call him Ryan for this story. Ryan is a good man. He's quiet. He's always been the kind of guy who speaks less and observes more, an introvert in the truest sense. He doesn't need to fill the air with empty words. I loved that about him. I loved how steady he was. We moved here to this bustling, expensive, demanding city with dreams of building a life. But dreams in a city like Toronto come with a price tag. When we first arrived, the dynamic was very traditional. Ryan had a job. He works for a retail company, a modest job, hard work, long hours on his feet, dealing with customers, managing inventory. It's honest work. But in a city where the rent for a one-bedroom apartment can swallow a paycheck whole, it was tight. I remember the early days. I remember sitting on our second-hand sofa, holding a cup of tea and telling him, Ryan, I want to work. I want to help. I have a background in IT. I knew I could find something. I knew I could contribute. But Ryan, he would look at me with those soft, tired eyes and shake his head. No, he would say, not yet. You're new here. Take your time. Settle in. Make this house a home first. He would puff out his chest just a little bit when he said, I've got this. I'm the husband. It's my job to take care of you. There was a sweetness in that old school protectiveness. He wanted to be the provider. He wanted to be the hero of our little story. And for a while I let him. I stayed home. I organised the kitchen. I explored the neighbourhood. I waited for him to come home every evening. But love doesn't pay the hydro bill. Love doesn't pay for the groceries that seem to get more expensive every single week. I started to notice things, small things. I noticed the way he would stand in the kitchen, staring at a bill on the counter, his brow furrowed, doing mental math that didn't seem to add up. I noticed how he stopped buying coffee from the shop downstairs and started making a weak, watery brew at home to take in a travel mug. I noticed that he stopped talking about buying new winter boots, even though his old ones were leaking. He was drowning, and he was too proud to ask for a life raft. I couldn't watch it anymore. I couldn't watch the man I love crumble under the weight of being the man. So without making a big deal out of it, I started applying for jobs. I polished my resume and I sent out emails. And because this city is hungry for tech talent, it didn't take long. I got an offer. It was from a large multinational IT firm, a sleek office downtown, full benefits and a salary package that was substantial. I remember the day I told him. It was a Tuesday evening. The heater was humming in the corner. I made his favourite dinner. I waited until he had eaten, until he seemed relaxed. Ryan, I said gently, I got a job. He looked up, a piece of bread halfway to his mouth. You did? Yes, I said. It's a great opportunity and the pay is really good. He put the bread down. That's good, babe. Congrats. He tried to smile. I know he tried, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. It stopped somewhere around his mouth, tight and strained. Then came the hard part, the paperwork, the details. When he eventually saw my offer letter, when he saw the numbers in black and white, the silence in the room changed. It became heavy. My starting salary was nearly double what he was making after 3 years at his company. Double. I saw him stare at that number. He didn't say anything mean. He didn't get angry. He just shrank. It was as if the air had been let out of him. He nodded slowly, handed the paper back to me and said, wow, that's a lot. That night he went to bed early. He turned his back to me. When I reached out to touch his shoulder, his muscles were tense, hard as a rock. That was the beginning. That was the moment the frost started to form on the window. You see, I thought this would solve our problems. I thought, finally we can breathe. Finally we can save. We can buy a car. We can go out for dinner without checking the bank account first. But I didn't calculate the cost of his ego. I started the job. I loved it. I was good at it. The first paycheck hit our account and it felt amazing. I felt powerful and I felt like an equal partner. I wanted to celebrate. I wanted to treat us, but Ryan retreated into a shell I didn't know he had. I remember the first time I tried to transfer money to him. Ryan, I said, I'm sending 80% of my check to the joint account. We can use this for the rent, for the bills. You don't have to stress anymore. He looked at me, his face blank. I don't need your money, he said. His voice was quiet, but it had an edge to it, a sharpness I wasn't used to. It's not my money, I argued softly. It's our money. We are husband and wife. I can pay the rent, he said stubbornly. I've been paying it, haven't I? But you don't have to struggle, I pleaded. Why should you struggle when we have this? I eventually forced him to take access to the account. I insisted. I thought if the money was just there, he would eventually use it. He would see that it was okay, but he didn't. Weeks turned into months. The money from my job sat in that account, piling up, untouched. It was like he was allergic to it. He wouldn't buy a shirt with it. He wouldn't buy gas with it. He wouldn't even buy a carton of milk with it. He continued to grind. He continued to work those long shifts, coming home exhausted, his feet aching, his wallet thinning out day by day. He paid the rent from his own small salary, leaving himself with almost nothing. I watched him transform from my partner into a roommate who was trying to prove a point that I didn't understand. He became solitary. He stopped talking about his day. If I asked, how was work? He would just shrug and say, fine. If I tried to talk about my day, about a project I closed or a meeting I led, he would listen, but his eyes would glaze over. He would look at his phone or at the TV or anywhere but at me. It felt like my success was a bright light that was hurting his eyes, so he had to look away. It hurts, you know. It hurts to be doing well and to feel like you have to apologise for it. It hurts to come home excited and have to dim your own light because your husband feels shadowed by it. I tried to be small. I tried to be quiet. I stopped talking about my wins. I stopped mentioning the bonuses. I thought maybe if I stopped talking about it, he would go back to being the Ryan I married. But the silence only grew louder. And then things started to get weird, really weird. It wasn't just about the bills anymore. It was about him. It was about how he started living a separate life within our shared four walls. He stopped asking me for anything, not even a glass of water. If we were sitting on the couch and he was thirsty, he wouldn't say, hey, could you grab me a water? No. He would pause the movie, get up, walk to the kitchen, get it himself and come back. If he had a headache, he wouldn't ask, do we have any Tylenol? He would search the cabinet silently until he found it. It sounds small, doesn't it? But when you live with it, it feels like rejection. Every single time. It feels like he is building a fortress around himself and I am not allowed inside. I can do it myself. That became the unwritten motto of our house. I would look at him and think, who are you? You're the man I sleep next to. You're the man I promised my life to. Why are you treating me like a stranger? The apartment felt colder. The distance between us on the sofa felt like miles. And the money, that growing pile of digital numbers in the bank, felt less like a safety net and more like a curse. I didn't know it then, but there was something else going on, something deeper than just jealousy or ego. I was looking at the symptoms, but I couldn't see the disease. I thought he was just being stubborn. I I didn't know what was happening in his mind or in his pockets. I didn't know how empty his wallet really was. And I certainly didn't know that my attempt to fix it, my attempt to show him love, would lead to the most hurtful night of my life. But that is where the real mystery begins. As I stand here tonight looking at the frost gathering on the window pane, blurring the lights of Toronto, I can still hear the sound of his voice from that night. I can still feel the sting of his anger. We're drifting apart, floating on two different icebergs in the same dark ocean, and I was about to make a move that would either crash us together or sink us both. That was the beginning of the freeze, but you won't believe what I found when I finally looked closer, when I finally dared to open the leather wallet he kept so guarded in his pocket. Join me in the next chapter as we open the ghost in the bank account. Good night for now. Or is it? Are you comfortable? Good. Pull the blanket up a little higher. Let the warmth settle around you. In the last chapter, we stood by the frosty window and watched the beginning of the divide. We talked about the job, the salary, and the silence. Now I want to take you deeper inside the apartment. I want to take you into the mundane, quiet tragedy of our daily routine. We often think that marriages fall apart with a bang, an explosion, a screaming match, a slammed door, but more often they unravel in the quiet moments. They break over a grocery bill. They fracture over the temperature of the thermostat. They shatter in the silence of a car ride. Let's talk about the ghost. No, not a spirit in white sheets rattling chains. This ghost was digital. It lived in the cloud. It lived in our banking app. It was the money. Every 2 weeks, like clockwork, my phone would light up. Ping! A direct deposit notification. A healthy, robust number would land in my account. In any other life, in any other relationship, this would be a moment of joy. We would order takeout. We might book a weekend getaway to Niagara Falls. We might just breathe a sigh of relief. But in our house, that notification sound was like a warning bell. I would transfer the agreed amount, 80%, to our joint savings account. I did it religiously. I wanted Ryan to see it. I wanted him to know, look, we are safe. We have a cushion. But that money, it just sat there. It became a stagnant pool. Ryan had access to it. He had a debit card linked to it. But I checked the logs. He never used it, not once. It was as if that money was cursed. It was as if he believed that if he spent even $1 of my earnings, he would lose a piece of his soul. Let me paint you a picture. It's a Saturday afternoon. We are at the supermarket. The aisles are crowded. The fluorescent lights are humming overhead. We are pushing a cart with a wobbly wheel. I stop in front of the pasta sauce. There's the brand we used to love, the one with the roasted garlic and basil. It's $8 a jar. Then there's the generic store brand on the bottom shelf, watery, bland, full of sugar. It's $3. I reach for the good one. I mean, why not? We can afford it. We can afford 100 jars of it if we want. But before my hand can touch the glass jar, Ryan is there. He doesn't say anything aggressive. He just gently, firmly steers the cart toward the generic brand. This one is fine, he says. Ryan, I say, keeping my voice low, we don't have to buy the cheap one. The other one tastes better. He doesn't look at me. He's looking at the price tag. It's $5 difference, Snehar. That adds up to what? I want to scream. We have thousands sitting in the bank. But I don't scream. I sigh. I put the good sauce back. I watch him pick up the cheap one. And in that moment, the ghost is there in the aisle with us. The ghost of the money we have but cannot touch. It wasn't just the groceries. It was the apartment itself. Toronto winters are brutal. The wind chill can drop to -20, -30 degrees. The cold seeps into your bones. Our apartment has baseboard heating. It's expensive to run. Before I got the job, we were always careful with it. We wore sweaters inside. We used extra blankets. That was necessary then. But now I was coming home from my corporate office, tired and cold, wanting nothing more than a warm home. I would walk in and find the thermostat set to 65 degrees. The air would be crisp, almost biting. Ryan would be sitting on the couch, wrapped in a hoodie and a thick blanket, reading a book. I would walk over to the thermostat and turn it up just a little to 70. 10 minutes later, I would hear the click of the dial. He had turned it back down. It wastes electricity, he would mumble. I'm cold, Ryan, I would say. I pay for the electricity. I can pay for the heat. Please let me be warm. He would look at me with that guarded, stubborn expression. We don't need to burn money just because you have it. Just because you have it. That was the phrase that hung in the air. He made it sound like my salary was a vice, like it was something indulgent, something shameful. He treated my success like a lottery win that I didn't deserve rather than the result of my hard work. So I learned to be cold. I bought fuzzy socks. I bought a heated throw blanket for myself. I lived in a frozen house because my husband's pride was more fragile than the ice on the sidewalk. This behaviour, this relentless frugality, it started to warp our relationship. We stopped being partners. We became roommates who were playing a game of chicken. He was trying to prove he could survive on his meagre salary. I was trying to prove that he didn't have to. And because of this, we stopped sharing meals. It started slowly. He would come home late from the retail store. I ate a sandwich at work, he would say, or I'm not hungry. I would eat dinner alone at the table, scrolling through my phone, the silence of the apartment pressing in on my ears. Later, around 10 p.m. or 11 p.m, I would hear him in the kitchen, the clinking of a spoon, the rustle of a wrapper. He would be making instant noodles or heating up a can of soup. He was eating the cheapest food possible alone in the dark so he wouldn't have to eat the food I bought. Can you imagine how that feels? To lie in bed and hear your husband eating 50-cent noodles in the kitchen because he refuses to let you buy him a steak. It made me feel useless. It made me feel like my contribution to this marriage was toxic to him. I tried to talk to him. God knows I tried. One night I sat him down. Ryan, what are we doing? I asked. Why are we living like we are broke? We are not broke. He looked at his hands. His cuticles were rough, cracked from the dry winter air and the manual labour at his job. I'm just saving. He said, you never know what can happen. You need to save for the future. But what about the present? I asked. We are miserable in the present. I'm not miserable, he lied. I'm fine. But he wasn't fine. I could see it. He was losing weight. His clothes hung a little looser on his frame. There were dark circles under his eyes that hadn't been there when we got married. He looked exhausted. He looked like a man who was carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders, but refused to let anyone help him lift it. He was working overtime shifts whenever he could get them. He would come home with his feet swollen, his back aching, and for what? For a few extra dollars that we didn't technically need. It didn't make sense. It was illogical. And that's when the suspicion started to creep in. You see, ego is one thing, male pride is one thing, but this was bordering on obsession. This was survival mode. Why was he so desperate for cash? Why was he guarding his own small salary like it was the last water in the desert? I started watching him more closely. I noticed that he stopped going out with his friends. He used to have a guys' night once a month, beers and wings at a local pub. He stopped going. Too tired, he said. But I knew it was the $40 he didn't want to spend. I noticed his shoes. His work shoes were worn down at the heel. The leather was cracking in the snow and slush of Toronto. That's dangerous. Your feet get wet. You get sick. Let's go buy you boots, I said one weekend. My treat. A gift. These are fine, he snapped. They have another season in them. They didn't. I knew they didn't. The distance between us grew so wide that I felt like I was living with a stranger who slept in my bed, who breathed my air, but who wouldn't share a single part of his life with me anymore. And then came the day that broke me. It was a Tuesday, a stormy Tuesday. The snow had turned to freezing rain. The streets were sheets of ice. The wind was howling, rattling the windows. Ryan was getting ready for work. He looked pale. He was coughing a little, a dry, hacking cough that he had been ignoring for a week. Ryan, I said, catching him at the door, don't take the subway today. It's terrible out there. The walk to the station is dangerous. He buttoned his coat. I'll be fine. Please, I said, let me call you an Uber. It's $30. It's nothing. I'll order it from my phone. You just hop in. He froze. His hand was on the doorknob. He turned to look at me, and for a second I saw a flash of something in his eyes. Was it fear? Was it shame? I said no. He said, his voice hard. I don't need your Uber. I have legs. I can walk. Why are you being like this? I cried out, frustrated beyond belief. Why is it a crime for me to help you? He didn't answer. He just opened the door and walked out into the freezing rain. I ran to the window. I watched him down on the street. He was hunched over against the wind, slipping on the ice, trudging toward the subway station. He looked so small, so defeated. I sat on the floor and cried. I cried not because he was mean, but because I didn't understand. I didn't understand what monster was eating him from the inside. I thought it was just me. I thought it was just my salary, but I was missing a piece of the puzzle. Later that week, while cleaning the bedroom, I saw it at his wallet. He had left it on the dresser. He never leaves it. He usually keeps it in his pocket or in his bedside drawer, but he had rushed out to take out the trash and he left it there. It was a brown leather wallet, old, worn at the edges. I stared at it. It sat there like a forbidden object. In a marriage, nothing should be hidden, right? But with Ryan, everything was hidden. I remembered how he never opened it in front of me anymore. I remembered how, if we were out and he had to pay for something small, he would turn his back to me while he fished for cash. What was he hiding in there? Was it empty or was there something else? A receipt? A note? A secret? The ghost in the bank account was haunting us, but the secrets in that leather wallet, those were the things that were about to bring everything crashing down. I reached out my hand. My fingers brushed the cool leather. My heart was pounding in my chest like a drum. I knew I shouldn't invade his privacy, but I was his wife, and I was desperate to understand the man who was becoming a stranger to me. I picked it up. It felt light, too light. I took a deep breath, looked at the door to make sure he wasn't coming back yet, and I opened it. What I saw inside that wallet didn't just shock me. It broke my heart, and it set the stage for the explosion that was about to come. Join me in the next chapter as we look inside secrets in the leather wallet. Let's go back to that moment. The bedroom, the grey light of a stormy Tuesday filtering through the blinds, the sound of the front door latch clicking shut as Ryan went down the hall to the trash chute. I was standing by the dresser. My hand was hovering over his wallet. Have you ever held a secret in your hands? It feels heavy, doesn't it? Even if it's just a small object, the weight of the unknown pulls at you. I picked it up. It was warm. It must have been in his pocket just minutes ago. The leather was soft, worn down by years of use. It was the same wallet he had when we first met. Back then, I thought its tattered edges were charming, a sign of a man who didn't care about flashy things. Now it looked like a symbol of his stubbornness. I hesitated. There is an invisible line in a marriage, a boundary of privacy that you are not supposed to cross. We share a bed, we share a life, but we don't share everything. But desperation makes you do things you wouldn't normally do. I took a breath, looked at the bedroom door one last time to make sure I was alone, and I flipped it open. It wasn't what I found that stopped my heart, and it was what I didn't find. The billfold, the part where the cash goes, was flat. I used my thumb to separate the leather flaps. I peered inside, expecting maybe a 20 or a 10, maybe even just a $5 bill. There was nothing. Well, not quite nothing. There was a single lonely toonie, that's our $2 coin here in Canada, just one coin slipping around in the empty space. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. I checked the card slots. His debit card was there, his ID, a few old loyalty cards for coffee shops he never went to anymore, and his Presto card, the pass we use for the subway and buses in Toronto. I pulled the subway card out. I don't know why I did it. Maybe I was looking for clues. I turned it over. I saw he had written a small note on the back in permanent marker, a date. It was the expiration date. I remembered something. You can check the balance of these cards on an app. I had the app on my phone because I managed my own commute. What? My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone. I typed in the serial number from the back of his card. Loading. The balance popped up on the screen. 75 cents. 75 cents. In Toronto, a single trip on the subway cost $3.35. He didn't have enough for a ride. He didn't even have enough to get halfway to work. I stared at the screen and then I stared at the empty wallet. The pieces of the puzzle slammed together in my mind, creating a picture so painful I wanted to look away. That morning, when I offered him an Uber, when he snapped at me and said, "I have legs, I can walk," he wasn't being an eco-warrior. He wasn't trying to get exercise. He was walking because he had to. He was going to walk 3 kilometers in freezing rain to get to work because he didn't have $3.35. And the lunch? The "I'm not hungry" excuse. He wasn't fasting. He was starving. He was working an 8, maybe 9-hour shift on his feet, lifting boxes, dealing with customers, running around the store on an empty stomach. Maybe he would drink water from the fountain. Maybe he would have a cheap coffee if he found some loose change, but he was starving himself. I looked around our bedroom. I looked at the expensive duvet on our bed, and I looked at my closet full of clothes. I looked at my jewelry box. We were living in the same house, but we were living in two different economic worlds. I was living in comfort and my husband was living in poverty. Why? Why was he doing this? Tears pricked my eyes. It wasn't anger anymore. It was pure, unadulterated heartbreak. I realised then that his ego wasn't just about arrogance. It was about shame. He felt that if he took my money, if he used the money from his wife to buy a sandwich or a subway ticket, he would cease to be a man. He would rather walk in the rain. He would rather be hungry. It was stupid. It was archaic. It was maddening, but it was also tragic. I couldn't let him do this. I couldn't let him walk out of this house with 75 cents to his name. I couldn't sit in my office drinking an artisan latte, knowing my husband was dizzy from hunger. I had to do something. I put his wallet down on the dresser and ran to my purse. I always keep a little emergency cash. I dug through my bag. My fingers brushed against my own wallet. Sleek, full, functional. I pulled out a stack of bills. $3 $50 notes, $150. It wasn't a fortune, but to him, right now, it would be a lifeline. It would mean he could take a cab if he was tired. It would mean he could buy a hot lunch. It would mean he could buy those boots he desperately needed. I ran back to the dresser. I opened his wallet again. I folded the bills neatly. I tucked them inside the billfold. I made sure they were deep inside so they wouldn't fall out, but visible enough that he would see them when he opened it. I placed the wallet back exactly where he had left it. Same angle, same spot. My heart was racing. It felt like I was committing a crime. It felt like I was planting evidence. I heard the heavy thud of the front door that he was back. I quickly moved away from the dresser. I grabbed a laundry basket and pretended to be sorting clothes. Ryan walked into the bedroom. He looked tired. His hair was damp from the brief walk to the trash room. "Trash is out," he mumbled. "Thanks," I said. My voice sounded too high, too bright. I cleared my throat. "You better get going. You don't want to be late." He nodded. He walked over to the dresser. I held my breath. I stopped folding the shirt in my hands. I watched him out of the corner of my eye. He reached for the wallet. He picked it up. He didn't open it. He just slid it into his back pocket. "All right," he said. "I'm off." "Ryan," I called out. He stopped in the doorway. "Yeah? Be safe, okay?" He gave me a weird look. I'm going to work. Sneha. "Not to war." "You are going to war," I thought. "A war against yourself." He left. I spent the rest of the day in a haze of anxiety. I went to work, but I couldn't focus. I sat in meetings, nodding at charts and graphs, but my mind was in Ryan's pocket. I imagined him getting to the subway station. I imagined him reaching for his Presto card, remembering it was empty, and then opening his wallet to see if he had any change. I imagined the look on his face when he saw the purple $50 bills. Would he be relieved? Would he smile? Would he think, "Thank God I can buy lunch today"? Or would he know it was me? Of course he would know it was me. Who else would it be? The tooth fairy? I hoped that his hunger would outweigh his pride. I hoped that seeing the cash would break the spell. I hoped he would text me. A simple text. "Thanks, babe. I needed that." Or maybe, "Let's talk later." But my phone stayed silent all day. No text, no call. The silence began to curdle into dread. By the time I left work, the storm had cleared, but the city was freezing. I took an Uber home. I got there before him. I paced around the living room. I turned on the TV, then turned it off. I cooked dinner. Something simple. Chicken and rice. I wanted the house to smell good. I wanted a peace offering waiting for him. 7 p.m. He usually gets home by now. 7:30 p.m. 8 p.m. I started to worry. Did something happen? Did he get stranded? And then I heard the key in the lock. Click. Turn. The door opened. Ryan walked in. The first thing I noticed was his face. It wasn't tired. It wasn't the usual blank mask of exhaustion. It was red. His eyes were blazing. His jaw was set so hard I could see the muscles twitching. He didn't take off his boots. He didn't take off his coat. He marched into the living room, bringing the cold air with him. He looked at me, and for the first time in 7 months, I felt afraid of my husband. Not physically afraid. He would never hurt me, but emotionally afraid. I was afraid of the explosion I had just triggered. He didn't say hello. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out the wallet. He gripped it so tightly his knuckles were white. "Sneha," he said. His voice was low, shaking. It was the sound of a pot boiling over. I stood up from the sofa. "Ryan, you're home. I made..." "Stop." He cut me off. "Just stop." He held up the wallet. "What is this?" he asked. It's your wallet," I stammered. I know it's my wallet, he shouted, his voice cracking. I want to know why you think you have the right to touch it. The air in the room seemed to vanish. I had hoped for relief. I had hoped for gratitude. I had even prepared for a little bit of annoyance. But this was rage. Pure, unblinded rage. He opened the wallet. He pulled out the three $50 bills. They looked crisp and bright in his trembling hand. Is this what you think of me? He asked. You think I'm a charity case? You think I'm a beggar? No, Ryan, please. I stepped forward. I saw it was empty. I just wanted to help. You need to eat. You need to take the subway. I don't need your help, he screamed, and then he did it. He balled up the money in his fist and with all his strength, he threw it. The bills didn't fly far. They were paper. They fluttered through the air, chaotic and slow, hitting my chest, brushing against my face and drifting to the floor. One of the bills landed on my foot. I stood there frozen. Don't you ever, he hissed, stepping closer to me, ever touch my things again. I am your husband, not your child. And not your project. He looked at the money on the floor with disgust, as if it were contaminated. I managed before you, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper that hurt more than the shouting. And I can manage without you. He turned around and walked into the bedroom, slamming the door so hard the pictures on the wall rattled. I stood alone in the living room. The smell of the chicken and rice I had cooked filled the air, suddenly making me feel nauseous. I looked down at the money scattered on the rug, the money I had worked for, the money I had given out of love. It lay there like trash. And in that moment, as the echo of the slamming door faded, I realised that I hadn't just crossed a boundary. I had started a war. But why? Why did $50 cause this much hate? What I didn't know, what I couldn't possibly know, was that the empty wallet wasn't just about poverty. It was covering up something else, something much bigger than lunch money. Ryan wasn't just broke, he was in debt, deep, secret debt, and my help had just humiliated him in a way I couldn't understand yet. The echo of those falling bills was the sound of our marriage cracking down the middle. But the worst part was that night I slept on the sofa and the stranger in the bedroom. He didn't come out to check on me once. If you're lying in the dark right now listening to this, I want you to think about the sound of paper hitting the floor. It's a quiet sound, isn't it? A rustle, a soft flutter, a whisper. But in my living room on that Tuesday night, those three $50 bills hit the floor with the weight of bricks. The sound echoed in my ears long after Ryan had slammed the bedroom door. Whoosh, flutter, silence, I stood there for a long time. The smell of the chicken and rice I had cooked was still heavy into the air, but now it made my stomach turn. I looked down at the money. The Queen's face on the Canadian bills stared back at me from the rug, purple and crisp. I felt dirty. I felt like I had done something wrong, even though I knew logically I hadn't. I had tried to feed my husband. I had tried to make sure he didn't freeze on his way to work, but as I knelt down to pick up the money, I felt a deep, burning shame. I picked up the first bill. My hand was shaking. I picked up the second. I picked up the third. I didn't put them back in my purse. I couldn't. I felt like if I put them back with my other money, they would contaminate everything. So I shoved them into a junk drawer in the kitchen under some takeout menus and old batteries. I just wanted them out of sight. That night was the longest night of my life. I couldn't go into the bedroom. The door was closed, and even though I had a key, even though it was my room too, it felt like a fortress I wasn't allowed to enter. I grabbed a blanket from the linen closet. I turned off the lights. I lay down on the sofa. The apartment was pitch black. The city lights of Toronto filtered through the sheer curtains, casting long, pale shadows across the room. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening. I was waiting for the door to open. I was waiting for him to come out, to say, I'm sorry, to say I overreacted, to say, Sneha, come to bed. It's cold out here. But the door didn't open. I heard him moving around in there. I heard the creak of the bed springs as he lay down. I heard him cough, that dry, hacking cough that he still hadn't treated. He knew I was out there. He knew I was sleeping on a lumpy couch in the cold living room, and he didn't care. That was the realization that kept me awake until 3 a.m. It wasn't the anger that scared me. It was the indifference. It was the way he could turn off his empathy like a light switch. We had been married for 7 months. 7 months of I love you, good night, good morning. And in 1 second, over $150, he had erased it all. I eventually drifted into a restless sleep. When I woke up, the sun was streaming in, harsh and bright. My neck was stiff. I sat up and looked at the clock. 7:30 a.m. Ryan would be getting up for work. I had a moment of panic. How do we do this? How do we face each other after last night? Do we pretend it didn't happen? Do we scream? I went to the kitchen to make coffee. I needed something to hold on to. Then the bedroom door opened. Ryan walked out. He was dressed for work. His shirt was ironed. He must have done it the night before while I was waiting for him. He looked terrible. His eyes were puffy and red-rimmed. His skin was pale. He looked like a man who hadn't slept a wink. But his expression was made of stone. He walked past me to get to the bathroom. He didn't look at me. He didn't acknowledge my presence. I was a ghost in my own home. Ryan, I said. My voice was raspy from sleep and crying. He didn't stop. He closed the bathroom door. The lock clicked. I stood there holding the bag of coffee beans, feeling like I had been punched in the gut. When he came out, he went straight to the front door. He started putting on his boots, those old cracked boots that were leaking. Ryan, please, I tried again. Can we talk about this? I can't leave it like this. He finished tying his laces. He stood up and put his hand on the doorknob. Finally, he looked at me. But there was no warmth. There was no husband in those eyes. There's nothing to talk about, he said. His voice was flat, monotone. You made your point. You have the money. I have nothing. I get it. That's not what I meant, I cried. I just didn't want you to be hungry. I'm not hungry, he lied. I'm full of this. He gestured vaguely at the apartment, at me, at everything. Don't touch my wallet again, he added, and don't wait up for me. And then he was gone. The apartment fell silent again. But this silence was different. Before, the silence was just awkward. Now the silence was heavy. It was loaded. It felt like the air before a thunderstorm. I went to work that day, but I was a zombie. I sat at my desk in my high-rise office looking at spreadsheets, but all I could see was his face. I started to analyse everything. I started to spiral. Was I the problem? I Googled husband jealous of wife's salary. I read articles about toxic masculinity and financial infidelity. I read forums where people said, leave him, he's insecure. Others said, be patient. Men define themselves by their ability to provide. But none of it fit perfectly. Ryan wasn't just insecure. He was punishing himself. Why did he throw the money? Because it exposed him. I realised that by putting that money in his wallet, I hadn't just given him cash. I had taken away his ability to pretend. As long as his wallet was empty, he could tell himself he was a martyr. He could tell himself he was sacrificing for the future. He was the hero of his own tragic movie. But when I put the money there, I solved the problem. And if the problem was solved, he couldn't be the martyr anymore. He had to just be a husband who earned less than his wife, and he couldn't handle that reality. Or so I thought. Days turned into a week. This Cold War continued. We lived in the same 800 square foot apartment, but we were miles apart. He started coming home later and later. 9 p.m, 10 p.m. He wouldn't look at me. He wouldn't eat anything I cooked. The leftovers in the fridge piled up until I had to throw them away. It was heartbreaking. I would cook a meal, hoping it would be the olive branch, and the next day I would scrape it into the trash, the sound of the food hitting the bin, feeling like another defeat. And the money? My salary kept coming in. The bank balance kept growing. I looked at those numbers on my screen. Thousands of dollars, and I hated them. What was the point of this money? If it was destroying my life, I would have traded every single cent to have my husband back, and to have him sit on the couch and laugh with me, to have him hold my hand. But he wouldn't even touch me. If we passed each other in the hallway, he would press his back against the wall to avoid brushing against me. It was cruel. It was a psychological punishment. One evening, about a week after the incident, I came home early. I walked into the bedroom to change. I saw his phone on the nightstand. He was in the shower. I froze. The screen lit up with a notification. It wasn't a text from a friend. It wasn't an email from work. It was a reminder from a bank. Not our bank, a different one. I took a step closer. I didn't touch the phone. I had learned my lesson. I just leaned in to read the preview on the lock screen. Urgent payment past due. Please contact us immediately to avoid further action. My breath hitched. Payment past due? For what? We didn't have any debts. We paid off our credit cards every month. The rent was paid, the utilities were paid. I stared at the message until the screen went black. A second later, another notification popped up, a WhatsApp message. It was from a number saved as Mum. The message read, "Baba, did you send it? The doctor is asking again." My heart stopped. Mum, his mother, my mother-in-law. She lived back in our home country. We spoke to her occasionally. She was a sweet lady. Last time we spoke, she said she was fine. Just old age pains, she had said. The doctor is asking again. And the bank notification, payment past due. The pieces of the puzzle shifted. The picture changed. He wasn't hoarding money. He wasn't just being cheap. He wasn't just trying to outsave me. He was bleeding money. He was sending everything he had, every cent of his paycheck, every dollar he saved by starving himself, every penny he saved by walking in the snow somewhere else. But why didn't he tell me? I stood there in the darkening bedroom, the sound of the shower running in the next room. Why? If his mother was sick, why hide it? I have money. We have money. I would have given everything to help her. We could have flown her here. We could have paid for the best doctors. Why was he choosing to destroy himself and us instead of asking for help? The shower turned off. I panicked. I didn't want him to catch me looking at his phone. I ran out of the room and sat on the couch, my heart pounding against my ribs. He came out a few minutes later, toweling his hair. He looked even thinner than before. His ribs were showing. He didn't look at me. He went to the kitchen, and that's when I saw the scene that haunts me to this day. The scene that made me realise that I wasn't living with a villain. I was living with a man who was drowning in silence. I watched him from the shadows of the living room, and I watched him prepare his dinner, and what I saw broke me more than the thrown money ever could. Join me in the next chapter as we witness the heartbreaking reality of the stranger in the kitchen. Good night. We are deep in the night now. The city of Toronto has finally gone to sleep. The streetcars have stopped rumbling and the sirens have faded. But inside our apartment, the night was never peaceful. It was a waiting game. In the last chapter, I stood in the dark and saw the notification on Ryan's phone. Payment past due, and the text from his mother. The doctor is asking again. Those words were burning a hole in my mind, and I didn't confront him immediately. You might wonder why. You might think, Sneha, just kick the door down and ask him. But fear is a paralysing thing. I was afraid that if I pushed him right then, while he was naked and vulnerable after a shower, he would shatter, or worse, he would leave. I felt that our marriage was hanging by a thread, and one wrong word would snap it. So I waited. I retreated to the living room. I turned off the lamps. I sat on the sofa, pulling my knees to my chest, wrapping myself in the darkness like a shield. I became a spy in my own home. I listened to the sounds of him moving in the bedroom, the rustle of clothes, the creak of the floorboards, and then the silence. I waited for him to come out. I knew he would. Hunger is a primal thing. You can ignore it during the day when you are busy, when you are fueled by adrenaline and pride. But at night, at 1 a.m, the stomach demands to be heard. I watched the digital clock on the cable box. 1:15 a.m, 1:30 a.m. Then the bedroom door handle turned. Slowly, so slowly, he was trying not to make a sound. The door opened a crack. A sliver of light spilled into the hallway. Then Ryan stepped out. He was wearing his old grey sweatpants and a t-shirt that had a small hole in the shoulder. He looked like a ghost. He didn't turn on the hallway light. He navigated by the dim glow coming from the street lamps outside. He walked past the living room. He didn't see me curled up in the corner of the sofa, or maybe he did and he just didn't want to acknowledge me. He went into the kitchen. He turned on the light above the stove, just that one small yellow bulb. It cast long, sharp shadows across the counters. It created a small stage in the middle of the darkness, and there in that pool of yellow light I saw the stranger. I call him a stranger because the man standing there didn't move like my husband. My husband, the Ryan I married, was confident. He moved with purpose. He laughed with his whole body. This man moved like he was broken. He leaned against the counter for a moment, resting his forehead on the cool granite. He took a deep breath and I could see his ribcage expand. He looked hollow. He opened the cupboard. It was the cupboard where we kept the dry goods. He moved the boxes of expensive cereal, the ones I had bought, to the side. He pushed past the fancy granola. He reached all the way to the back and pulled out a packet of instant noodles. The cheap kind, the kind that costs 40 cents. He filled a small pot with water and put it on the stove. I watched him wait for the water to boil. Most people check their phones while they wait, or they hum a tune. Ryan just stood there. He stared at the blue flame of the gas burner. He stared at it with such intensity, such sadness, as if he was looking into a fire that was burning down his life. The water bubbled. He broke the noodle block and dropped it in. He didn't turn on the exhaust fan. The noise would have been too loud, so the steam rose up around his face, clouding his glasses. He took them off and rubbed his eyes, and that's when I saw it. When he took off his glasses and rubbed his face, the mask slipped. He grimaced, a sharp, wincing expression of pain. He put a hand to his stomach, pressing hard, doubling over just slightly. It wasn't just hunger pangs. It looked like a cramp. An ulcer, maybe. Stress manifests in the body. If you starve yourself, if you run on caffeine and anxiety for months, your body starts to eat itself. He was in pain. Real physical pain. I almost stood up. My instinct was to run to him, to say, Ryan, sit down. Let me make you something real. Let me make you an egg, some toast, anything. But I stayed frozen. The memory of the money hitting my face was still too fresh. If I went in there now, would he think I was pitying him again? Would he throw the pot of boiling water at the wall? So I stayed in the shadows. I watched my husband suffer because I didn't know how to bridge the gap between us. He poured the noodles into a bowl. He didn't add anything, no egg, no vegetables, just the salty chemical broth and the white starch. He didn't take the bowl to the table. He didn't sit down. He stood right there, leaning against the counter, and ate. He ate quickly, ravenously, like a man who hadn't seen food in days. The steam was still rising from the bowl, probably burning his tongue, but he didn't care. He shoveled the food into his mouth, swallowing it down as if it were medicine he had to take to survive another day. It was the loneliest thing I have ever seen. Here we were in a luxury apartment in downtown Toronto. We had a view of the CN Tower. We had smart appliances. We had money in the bank. And my husband was eating 40-cent noodles in the dark, clutching his stomach, hiding from his wife. He finished the bowl in under 2 minutes. He drank the broth, every last drop. Then he washed the bowl immediately. He dried it. He put it away. He wiped the counter. He erased every trace of his existence. If I walked into the kitchen 5 minutes later, I would never have known he was there. That was his goal, to be invisible, to be a zero-cost burden. After he finished cleaning, he didn't leave the kitchen right away. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He stared at the screen. The blue light illuminated his face, making him look pale and sickly. I knew what he was looking at. He was looking at that message. The doctor is asking again. I saw his thumb hover over the screen. He was typing something, then deleting it. Typing, deleting. He let out a sigh, a sound that was half sigh, half sob. It was a jagged, broken noise that tore through the silence of the apartment. He put the phone down on the counter. He gripped the edge of the granite with both hands, his knuckles turning white. He hung his head low, his chin touching his chest. And then he whispered. The apartment was so quiet that I heard it. It wasn't a prayer. It wasn't a curse. He whispered, I'm sorry, Ma. My heart shattered. It broke into a million pieces right there on the sofa. I'm sorry, Ma. He wasn't fighting me. He wasn't fighting my salary. He wasn't fighting the world. He was fighting time, and he was losing. He was a son who was trying to save his mother, and he was failing. And because he was failing, he felt he didn't deserve to eat, and he didn't deserve to sleep. He didn't deserve to be a husband. Everything made sense now. The empty wallet, the walking in the snow, the refusal to spend a dime of my money. He was maxing out everything he had, his credit, his energy, his health, to send every available dollar back home. But why hide it? Why treat me like the enemy? Because of the shame. In his mind, that traditional, stubborn, loving, foolish male mind, he was supposed to be the provider. He was supposed to take care of his mother and his wife. If he asked his wife to pay for his mother's medical bills, in his twisted logic, that meant he had failed as a man. He would rather destroy himself than admit he needed help. He picked up his phone. He turned off the stove light. The kitchen went black. He walked back toward the bedroom. He moved slowly, dragging his feet. The burst of energy from the noodles hadn't kicked in yet. He looked exhausted. He passed the living room again. This time he paused. He stopped right in front of where I was sitting in the dark. My heart hammered against my ribs. Does he see me? He stood there for a long moment, looking into the shadows. I held my breath. I wanted him to see me. I wanted him to reach out, but he just shook his head slightly, a gesture of defeat, and kept walking. The bedroom door clicked shut. I was alone again, but I wasn't the same Sneha who had sat down on the couch an hour ago. I wasn't the confused, angry wife anymore. I was a wife on a mission. I sat up. I wiped the tears from my cheeks. I knew what the problem was now, and I knew the name of the ghost. It wasn't ego. It was love. Misguided, stubborn, self-destructive love for his mother. But knowing the problem wasn't enough. I needed to know the scale of it. The doctor is asking again, how much? How bad was it? Was it a surgery? Was it a chronic illness? Was it life or death? And how much debt was Ryan actually in? If he was walking to work to save $3, if he was eating instant noodles to save $5, the hole must be deep. I couldn't sleep. I knew I wouldn't sleep. I needed to see the numbers. Ryan is careful. He locks his phone. He hides his bills. But there was one place he might have slipped up, and one place where the paper trail might still exist. He had a laptop, an old clunky laptop that he rarely used because he did everything on his phone. But sometimes for tax forms or big transfers, he used it. It was in the spare room, the office, that was really just a storage closet. I stood up. My legs were stiff. I walked toward the spare room. I wasn't invading his privacy anymore. I was performing a rescue operation. You don't ask for permission to break down a door when the house is on fire, and our house was burning down silently from the inside out. I opened the laptop. It hummed to life. I needed the password. I tried his birthday. Incorrect. I tried our anniversary. Incorrect. That hurt a little. I tried his mum's name. Incorrect. Then I thought about the wallet. I thought about the struggle. I thought about his mindset. I typed in a word, a simple word that defined his entire existence right now. Success. No. Family. No. Then I tried the name of his childhood street. He had told me once that it was the only place he ever felt truly safe. Maple Street, 123. The screen unlocked. I was in. I navigated to his browser history. I went to his banking portal. Thankfully, the password was saved. I clicked on accounts, and then I gasped. The sound was loud in the quiet room. I covered my mouth with my hand. I was looking at a number in red, a number so big with a negative sign in front of it that it didn't seem real. It wasn't just a few $1,000s. Ryan wasn't just broke, and he was drowning. And there was one more transaction pending, a transaction that would push him over the edge. I stared at the screen, tears blurring my vision. Oh, Ryan, I whispered. What have you done? But the numbers on the screen were only half the story. The real tragedy was why he needed that specific amount and what he was planning to sell to get it. We are in the small, cramped spare room of our apartment. The air is stale. The only light comes from the glowing screen of an old laptop. I want you to imagine the feeling of looking at a car crash. You want to look away, but you can't. You have to see the damage. You have to understand how bad it is. That is how I felt looking at my husband's banking portal. In the last chapter, I cracked the password. Maple Street, 123. I logged in and I saw red. Let me tell you exactly what I saw, because numbers tell a story that words often hide. Ryan had 3 credit cards. Card 1, limit $10,000, balance $9,980. Card 2, limit $5,000, balance $4,950. Card 3, a high interest store card, limit $2,000, balance $2,100. Over limit. Then there was the line of credit, maxed out, and then the checking account. Balance $12.40. I sat back in the creaky office chair. My hand flew to my mouth to stifle a gasp. $45,000. My husband, the man who wouldn't buy a $5 jar of pasta sauce, the man who walked in the snow to save subway fare, was $45,000 in debt. But debt doesn't just appear. You don't rack up 45 grand on coffee and movies. I clicked on the transaction history tab. I needed to see where the money was going. It wasn't gambling. gambling, it wasn't stocks, it wasn't another woman, it was the single repeated name. Western Union International transfer every 2 weeks. The moment his paycheck hit, it was gone, transferred out. And in between paychecks, there were cash advances from credit cards with exorbitant fees immediately transferred to the same destination. I opened his email. I felt guilty, yes, but I was past the point of return. I needed context. I searched for mom, hundreds of emails. I opened the most recent one. It was from a doctor back home. Attached was a PDF invoice. Cardiac bypass surgery post-op care, $18,000 USD. Due immediately. I scrolled back. Dialysis treatment, monthly cycle, medication, imported, hospital bed rental. The dates aligned perfectly with our marriage. Ryan's mother wasn't just sick. She was fighting for her life, and the healthcare system back home required cash up front. I read an email chain between Ryan and his aunt. Ryan, we need more. The pharmacy won't release the meds without payment. Ryan, I'm trying, Auntie. I'm working overtime. I'll send it by Friday. Please just tell them to wait. Aunt, you are the son. It is your duty. Your father is gone. Who else will do it? You are the son. It is your duty. Those words hit me like a physical blow. I stared at the screen, and suddenly the last 7 months replayed in my mind like a movie. But this time I understood the plot. When he refused to let me work initially, it wasn't because he was controlling. It was because he didn't want to drag me into his mess. He wanted to shield me from the burden of his family's tragedy. When he got angry about my salary, it wasn't jealousy. It was shame. Every dollar I earned was a reminder of what he couldn't provide. He felt like a failure because his wife was rich while his mother was dying, and he couldn't bridge the gap without taking my money, which his pride wouldn't let him do. He wasn't eating instant noodles because he was cheap. He was eating them so he could send an extra $50 to buy his mother's heart medication. So he wasn't walking in the snow to prove a point. He was walking because that $3.35 subway fare was the difference between his mother having a nurse for an hour or being alone. I put my head in my hands. Tears streamed down my face, hot and fast. I had called him toxic. I had called him egotistical. I had complained that he was distant. Meanwhile, he was carrying the weight of the world. He was setting himself on fire to keep his mother warm, and he was doing it in silence because he thought that was what a man was supposed to do. He didn't want to be a burden to me. He wanted to be my hero. And because he couldn't be the hero financially, he tried to be the hero by suffering alone. It was so stupid, so incredibly, heartbreakingly stupid, and so full of love. But then I saw something else. There was a browser tab open in the background. I clicked it. It was an online marketplace like Craigslist or eBay. It was a draft of a post. He hadn't published it yet. The title read, Vintage Omega Seamaster Watch 1970s 100% Authentic Urgent Sale. I froze. I knew that watch. It was his father's watch. His dad had worn it every day for 30 years. When his dad passed away, it was the only thing Ryan kept. He cherished it. He didn't wear it often because he was terrified of scratching it. He kept it in a velvet box in his sock drawer. He once told me, Sneha, when we have a son one day, this is for him. It's the family legacy. And now, looking at the screen, I saw the asking price he had typed in, $1,200. It was worth way more than that, but he had written urgent sale and cash only. He was going to sell his father's legacy. He was going to sell the future heirloom of our unborn son just to pay off the minimum payment on a credit card so the debt collectors would stop calling for a week. He was stripping himself bare. He had given his money, his health, his food, his comfort, and now he was giving up his memories. I looked at the time on the laptop, 3:45 a.m. He was planning to post this ad in the morning. I couldn't let that happen. I looked at the bank tab again. I looked at the frightening red number, $45,000. Then I opened a new tab. I logged into my bank account. The interface loaded green numbers. Savings balance, $62,000. I stared at the two numbers. His debt, 45,000.mysavings. 45,000.mysavings. 62,000. I had been saving this for a house, for a car, for a rainy day. Well, look around. It wasn't just raining. It was a hurricane. For months, I had been angry that he wouldn't share his life with me. But I realised now that I had been hoarding my own safety net. I called it our money, but it was in my name. I was waiting for him to ask. But a drowning man can't always ask for help. Sometimes he's too busy trying to keep his head above water to scream. I didn't hesitate, not for a second. This wasn't about bailing him out. This wasn't about power. This was about us. If we were going to be partners, his pain had to be my pain. His debt had to be my debt. I grabbed my purse from the floor. I pulled out my secure banking token. My hands were trembling, but not from fear, from adrenaline. I clicked on transfers. I added a new payee. I entered his credit card number, the big one, the $10,000 one. Amount $10,000. Confirm. Click. Status processing. I went to the second card. Amount $5,000. Confirm. Click. Status processing. I went to the line of credit. Amount $30,000. Confirm. Click. Status processing. I watched the screen. The little spinning wheel turned and turned. And then transfer complete. In less than 2 minutes, I had wiped out my savings account. The number that took me years to build was gone. I had about $15,000 left. But I felt lighter. I felt a rush of relief, so powerful it made me dizzy. I closed the tabs. I cleared the browser history. I wanted him to see the zero balance, but I didn't want him to know I had been snooping on his laptop. Wait, the watch. I had to make sure he didn't post that ad. I shut down the laptop. I put it back exactly where it was on the desk. I walked out of the spare room. The hallway was dark and quiet. I went into our bedroom. Ryan was sleeping. He was lying on his back, his mouth slightly open. Even in sleep, his brow was furrowed. He looked tense. He looked like he was dreaming of debt collectors and doctors. I crawled into bed beside him. It was the first time in weeks I had been this close to him, and I could feel the heat radiating off his body. I could hear the shallow rhythm of his breathing. I reached out and gently, very gently touched his hand, his rough, dry hand. He stirred. He mumbled something in his sleep. "No, I can't." "Shh," I whispered. "It's okay." I lay there in the dark, staring at his profile. I had paid the money. The financial beast was dead, but the emotional wall, that was still there. Paying the debt was the easy part. It was just math. It was just clicking buttons. The hard part was going to be the mourning. How do I tell a man who has built his entire identity on being the provider that his wife just saved him? How do I tell him without breaking his spirit completely? How do I tell him that I know about the noodles and the walking and the secret war he's been fighting? And more importantly, how do I convince him that we are a team and that needing help doesn't make him less of a man? The sun was starting to rise. The sky outside the window was turning a bruised purple. Ryan shifted. His alarm would go off in 20 minutes. He would wake up. He would reach for his phone. He would check his bank account, expecting to see the red warning signs. He would prepare to draft that ad for the watch. But instead, he was going to see something else. I closed my eyes and waited for the alarm. I waited for the moment the wall would finally come crumbling down. The morning light is here, and with it, the final confrontation, not with anger this time, but with truth. The sun is up now. If you're listening to this in the dark, I want you to imagine the first light of dawn, that pale soft blue that slowly turns into gold. It creeps across the floorboards, it touches the furniture, it warms the cold glass of the window. In Toronto, after a snowstorm, the morning light is blindingly bright. It reflects off the white snow and fills the room with a brilliance that makes it impossible to hide anything. It was 6:30 a.m. I was lying in bed pretending to be asleep. My heart was beating a slow, steady rhythm against the mattress. I felt Ryan shift beside me. The alarm on his phone buzzed. "Bzit, bzit." He reached out a heavy hand and silenced it. I heard him exhale a long, ragged breath. It was the sound of a man waking up to a nightmare. For him, waking up wasn't a fresh start. It was a return to the battlefield. It was another day of dodging calls, another day of hunger, another day of carrying a secret that was crushing his spine. I heard the familiar routine. He rolled onto his back and he rubbed his face, and then he reached for his phone. This was the moment. Every morning, his routine was the same. He would check his banking app, not because he expected money to be there, but because he needed to know which fire was burning hottest. He needed to see if the payment had bounced. He needed to see if the urgent red flag was still waving. I lay perfectly still. I listened to the tap, tap, tap of his thumb on the screen. Then silence. Absolute frozen silence. He didn't move. He didn't breathe. I opened my eyes just a slit. Ryan was sitting up in bed. He was staring at his phone, and his face wasn't angry. It wasn't sad. It was blank. It was the face of a man who is trying to process something his brain refuses to accept. He swiped his thumb down to refresh the page. Loading. He stared again. He shook his head slightly as if to shake a fly away. He closed the app. He reopened it. He logged in again. He was looking for the red numbers. He was looking for the negative sign. He was looking for the debt that had become his shadow. But the shadow was gone. Instead of $45,000, the screen showed a clean zero balance on the credit cards, and on the line of credit, zero. The monster was dead. What? He whispered. His voice was cracked, full of sleep and confusion. What is this? A glitch? He tapped the screen aggressively now. He went to the transaction history. He saw it. Transfer from ending in X 889. Transfer from ending in X 889. Transfer from ending in X 889. He froze. He knew that account number. It was my savings account. Slowly, very slowly, he turned his head. I was already looking at him. I wasn't pretending to sleep anymore. I was propped up on one elbow, watching him. His eyes were wide. There was fear in them and shame, a deep, burning shame. He looked like a child who had been caught stealing. Sneha, he whispered. What did you do? I paid it, Ryan, I said softly. You? He looked back at the phone, then at me. You went into my laptop? Yes. I saw everything. I interrupted him gently. I saw the doctors. I saw the medicine. I saw the emails from your aunt, and I saw the draft for your dad's watch. His face crumbled when I mentioned the watch. That was the crack in the dam. He turned away from me. He swung his legs over the side of the bed, putting his back to me. He put his head in his hands. You shouldn't have done that, he said, his voice shaking. It wasn't your problem. I had it under control. Under control. I sat up. Ryan, you were selling your father's watch. You are eating 40-cent noodles. You are walking in a blizzard to save $3. That is not control. That is suicide. It's my duty, he snapped, turning his head slightly. The old anger flared up for a second, the last defense mechanism of a dying ego. She is my mother. I am the son. I am supposed to provide. And I am your wife, I said, my voice rising just a little, firm and clear in the morning light. I am not your roommate. I am not a stranger. I am your partner. When you married me, you didn't just get a girl to sleep next to. You got a teammate. Shh. I moved closer to him. I reached out and put my hand on his back. I could feel his spine through his t-shirt. He was so thin. Ryan, why did you think my money was dirty? I asked. Why did you think that using my salary to save your mother made you less of a man? He didn't answer. His shoulders were shaking. Is it because I earn more? I asked. Is that it? Does the math hurt you? He took a deep, shuddering breath. No, he whispered. It's not the math. I wanted to take care of you. I brought you to this country. I promised your parents I would give you a good life. And look at me. I'm a failure. I'm drowning. If I take your money, what am I? I'm nothing. You are a loving son, I said, and you are a stubborn idiot. He let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. Ryan, I said, moving around so I was facing him. I took his face in my hands. He tried to look away, but I held him. Listen to me. Money is just a tool. It's just paper. It doesn't have a gender. It doesn't care who earned it. It only cares what it can do. I wiped a tear from his cheek with my thumb. My money was sitting in a bank doing nothing, just gathering digital dust while your mother was suffering. While you were suffering, do you think that makes me proud? To have a full bank account while my husband starves? He looked at me then. Really looked at me. The wall was coming down. The bricks were falling. I didn't want to drag you down, he said, his voice barely a whisper. You didn't drag me down. I said it. You pushed me away, and that hurt more than the debt. ever could. I leaned in and rested my forehead against his. We are a team, Ryan. If you fall, I catch you. If I fall, you catch me. That is the deal. That is the vow. You don't get to rewrite the vows just because your ego is bruised. He closed his eyes. I felt the tensions leave his body. It was like watching a wire snap. All the stress, all the sleepless nights, all the hunger. It all came pouring out. He leaned forward and buried his face in my neck. And he cried. My quiet, stoic, introverted husband held onto me like a lifeline and wept. He cried for his mother. He cried for his father's watch. He cried for the shame he had been carrying for 7 months. I held him. I stroked his hair. I didn't say anything. I just let him melt. The ice was gone. We sat there for a long time as the sun climbed higher in the sky, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. The apartment, which had felt so cold and hostile for weeks, suddenly felt warm again. Eventually the tears stopped. He pulled back and looked at me. His eyes were red, but they were clear. The shadows were gone. Thank you, he said, and this time he meant it. There was no bitterness, only relief. You're welcome, I said, but we have rules now. He managed a weak smile. Rules? Rule number 1, I said, counting on my fingers. No more secrets. If we owe $5 or $50,000, we look at the bill together. He nodded. Okay. Rule number 2, I continued. We call your mum today and we tell her that we sent the money, both of us, and we make a plan for her treatment that doesn't involve you starving yourself. Okay, he said. And rule number 3, I said, standing up from the bed. We are going to the kitchen and we are making breakfast. A real breakfast. Eggs, toast, coffee, and you are going to eat it. All of it. He looked up at me and for the first time in 7 months, I saw the Ryan I fell in love with. The softness was back. I am pretty hungry, he admitted. I smiled. I know. We walked to the kitchen together. The morning light was flooding the room. I opened the fridge, the same fridge that had been a source of tension for so long. I took out the eggs. I took out the butter. Ryan put the coffee on. The smell of brewing coffee filled the apartment, chasing away the stale smell of the night. We stood side by side at the counter, our elbows touched. It wasn't a grand romantic gesture, it was just breakfast. But after the war we had been through, the sound of eggs sizzling in the pan sounded like a symphony. While we ate, we talked. Real talk. We looked at the budget. It wasn't pretty. My savings were gone. We were starting from scratch, but we were starting from zero, not from a hole, and we were doing it together. Ryan called his mum later that day. I sat next to him, holding his hand. He told her the treatment was paid for. He didn't sound stressed. He sounded like a son who had done his duty, supported by a wife who had his back. He didn't sell the watch. It's still in the velvet box in his drawer, waiting for the future. And as for the money, we made a plan. We opened a new joint account. We called it the team account. My salary goes in. His salary goes in. We pay the bills. We send money to his mom. We save what's left. No more mine and yours. Just ours. That night, for the first time in a long time, the apartment wasn't cold. We sat on the couch, the same couch where I had slept alone just a few nights ago. Ryan had his arm around me. We were watching a movie, but I wasn't really watching it. I was looking at him. He looked younger. The lines of worry on his forehead had smoothed out. He was eating a bowl of popcorn, butter, salt, the works. He wasn't counting the cost of the kernels. He was just enjoying the moment. He caught me looking at him. What? He smiled. Nothing, I said, resting my head on his shoulder. Just glad to be home. He kissed the top of my head. I'm glad you're home too, Sneha. I'm glad you're here. And that's the story. It started with a frost on the window and it ended with the warmth of the sun. We think that love is about the big moments, the wedding, the vacations, the anniversaries. But sometimes love is about the hard moments. It's about navigating the messy, complicated, terrifying parts of life where money and ego and fear get in the way. It's about breaking down the walls we build to protect ourselves, only to realise that those walls were actually keeping out the light. Ryan and I are still working on it. We still have bills to pay. We still have struggles. But the difference is we aren't fighting each other anymore. We are fighting the world together. And the silence is gone. Our home is filled with noise now. The noise of cooking, the noise of talking, the noise of laughter. So, if you are lying there tonight worrying about a wall in your own life, maybe it's time to take a hammer to it. Or maybe, just maybe, you just need to turn on the light and see the person standing on the other side. The night is over. The storm has passed. Close your eyes, take a deep breath, and let the warmth of the story settle over you like a heavy blanket. You are safe. You are loved, and tomorrow is a new day to build something beautiful. Good night.